Welcome to back on the occasion of this fourth iteration in the series of propositions for non-fascist living, Unpacking Aesthetics and the far right. Many of you will know that this is the series that we began just a couple of months ago at BAC as a long-term series, exhibitionary, discursive, publication, education programs with the aim to think through, to imagine, to rehearse and enact with and through art the ways of living non-fascist life. And all this in the times when we see a dramatic resurfacing and reconstitutions of fascism into the public life, into contemporary society and culture. This particular session, session 4, is happening at the intersection of a number of ongoing conversations with artists, theorists, but also within some sort of institutional network that I see appearing across Europe vis-à-vis urgency that is contemporary fascisms. It's perhaps a point of culmination or marking point of these ongoing conversations, and I would like to name at least 3 of those lines of conversations. I would like to bring those to your attention. Most of all, it's the conversation with Anna Teixeira-Pinto and Giovanna Zapperi, who some of you who were here at the Propositions number 1 session, titled What We Mean, which took place, I believe, 6th of October last year. They presented extraordinary, powerful video statements within this series, establishing actually the whole trajectory of thinking through the propositions for non-fascist living. And by extension also, next to Anna and Giovanna, also Kader Attia, who together are preparing a project, in fact the continuation, a second part if you wish, of this conference, which will take place in La Colonie in Paris on 9th of May this year, and which will be addressing in depth the resurgence of fascism as a culture force and the creep of far-right idioms and tropes into the field of contemporary art, including issues such as, of course, codification of technology as futurity, the issues of weaponization of irony as political strategy, the histories and genealogies of the proto, crypto, and techno-fascism, among others. And in parallel, this experimental seminar will also attempt to draft a contemporary cartography, if you will, of counter-strategies emerging in present-day social movements and the political left. Now, next to this line of conversation, if you will, another one that I would like to mention is with Angela Dimitrakaki and Harry Wicks, who are currently working on a special issue of Third Text, the journal dedicated to the critical analysis of contemporary art in the global field. And this particular special issue will be thinking through the notions of anti-fascist art theory. They stay in their abstract. If I may bring a couple of words from that document, and I quote, "Despite a range of institutionally mediated approaches to fascism and anti-fascism, recognizing, for example, project here at BAC and La Colonie, art history and theory have been slow in their responses to the conditions of urgency referred to as fascism, fascism straight, neo, or post. And this special issue is intended as a critical intervention in addressing this deficit. At the moment when resurgent fascisms have found footholds, either within or close to the seats of political power at all coordinates of the global compass, what resistances are taking shape within art practice and theory? What are the political imaginaries that art mobilizes in relation to this? Can art actually contribute to a decolonial critique of fascism with adequate political rigor and in light of capital's neo-colonial logic?" They continue that this special issue takes an unambiguous anti-fascist position, and this is really important, rather than operating from a less focused and politically risky anti-totalitarian position. As the editors see a privileged connection, both historical and contemporary, between fascism and racialized masculinist capitalism. The investigations of fascism included in this issue will be therefore part of a developing anti-fascist art theory. A developing anti-fascist art theory, one where disagreement over explanatory roots and dissent over terminology never threatens the shared objective of standing against fascism as the first task of militant research at present, unquote. Next to these two lines of conversations, if you will, there is another one, which is that with the Centraal Museum here in Utrecht. And some of us had the privilege to be welcomed by the director of the museum, Bart Rutte, this morning, on the occasion of the last weekend of the exhibition of Paiko and the first opening weekend of Eric Wichmann's exhibition titled Free Radical. These are, of course, two Dutch artists with some sort of sympathies of affiliation with Italian fascism, which is not an unimportant reference for our conversation. But what's really important that on this occasion, on the occasion of these two exhibitions, the colleagues from the Central Museum prompted us quite concretely, very concretely, to address the questions of the relation between contemporary fascism and contemporary art directly. That was the challenge articulated towards us, pointing out, of course, to the fact that although fascism is becoming a common reference in the political and cultural life of the present, but there's no real consensus or understanding, even, let's say, of the accuracy of the term for the present, or within the contemporary condition, and of the said relation between contemporary art and contemporary fascism. So I think this is precisely where the challenge for today resides. Now, of course, the major difficulty, and we've been struggling with it up until now when developing this project, is that we, when talking about fascism and thinking about fascism today, we almost exclusively rely on the historical analogy, right? We think about the fascism of Hitler and Mussolini, of course, and thus imagining fascism to be the thing of the past. But thinking that the nastiest politics were behind us, in other words, that fascism cannot resurface in the present, or failing to recognize that the true fascism dangers, I believe, will creep in not from the past, but from the uncertain future. That's quite a hazard and risk we cannot afford taking, I think. And I'm reminded how we actually trying, no matter what in our discourse, avoid the word fascism. I'm reminded of a colleague from within the Former West Project who always said, we try not to say the word fascism until we can no longer not say it, right? And when we do say it, at that point when we are forced by the circumstances to say it, it might be too late. And you see it in the art world and within the discourse, very often we descend to to different tropes. We talk about nationalisms, we talk about totalitarianisms, we talk about racisms, we talk about other tropes, or we shift, we kind of go into very ornamental figures of speech. There have been projects that have dealt not with fascism, but with a F word. Yet, remembering a colleague always saying there is a danger of not wanting to name the thing, not to recognize the thing as fascism. The same somehow, I believe, goes for the articulation of the relationship between contemporary art and contemporary fascism. Also there, the historical analogy is limiting. We cannot rely on the historical analogy only, although when one thinks very superficially about the quick superficial analogy between Italian futurists and their obsession with speed, movement, technology, masculinity, war, then the connection to our present is rather chilling. Yet it really requires quite a serious examination. I think this is what we would like to start doing today, start unpacking these issues. It doesn't go without additional challenges, specifically in the field of contemporary art. For example, a dilemma about what kind of images are we going to circulate that would accompany invitation to this conference. Do we want to circulate particular imagery that is already there anyway, just for the sake of engaging in the critical conversation about those? You might have noticed that as humanly as possible, we try to withdraw imagery from announcing this project, which is because of the fear of contributing to recycling or to circulation of certain imagery, although even if with critical intentions might contribute precisely to naturalization or normalization of those things that we want to stand against firmly in the first place. As said, this is why, these are just a couple of notes for this opening, and that's why we called and convened this gathering. Now to seek ways of unpacking the current relations of art and fascist-curious aesthetics, if you will. Now in nearly closing of these brief opening remarks, let me just read out loud the excerpt from the abstract for today's gathering, and specifically the questions that we have articulated as our starting point. The political landscape in Europe and North America is peppered with fascisms, whose nihilisms bleed vividly into everyday life. These are fascisms, post-neo, crypto, or proto-fascisms, without a seemingly clearly articulated ideology. Their narratives may not cohere politically with each other, but they do cohere aesthetically. They align themselves with or attach themselves to objects, idioms or tropes, and open a toxic conduit between anti-establishmentarianism and outright racism and misogyny. This brings up the questions. Are present-day fascisms aesthetic or emotional in structure, rather than fully-fledged political doctrines? How to describe the nexuses between art, form, and far-right ideologies that take shape under the aegis of neoliberal governance? And is it possible to draw parallels with the early 20th century artistic movements that become ambivalent laboratories for fascisms yet to come? Now, in order to begin unpacking these questions, we are joined by some remarkable speakers today, not necessarily without challenges because of the supposedly gigantic storm that's landing up in the Netherlands. So not all flights have landed. So it will be a little bit exciting during this afternoon to see how and where we end up. But it's art historian and critic Larn X.C. Gogarty who's joining us today. Hopefully, artist Kader Attia, writer and art historian Angela Dimitrakaki, and writer and curator Iliana Fokianaki, writer and curator and musician Morgan Acquaintance, who will join us via Skype. We have writer and culture theorist Anna Teixeira Pinto, art historian Giovanna Zapperi, and art historian and researcher Harry Weeks. And Harry will moderate throughout this afternoon. But before I offer you a floor, a few additional comments and practicalities that I need to share with you. Of course, exhibition of Matthijs de Bruyne, with also featuring works by Jeremy Deller, Piero Ghilardi, and Milela Demen Ukeles, is on view, titled Compromiso Politico. And you can see that we had to roll in one of the objects from the foyer to make space for the bar and the kitchen That's why that object appeared on the stage, not unimportant for this conversation, as it screams crisis at us. Two, you're invited to join us, of course, for drinks, food, and stuff like that. You feel welcome to walk in and out of the room with or without drinks, as you wish. There's only one spot where we don't want you to go with drinks, and that's the mezzanine. So the first floor in the exhibition spaces. Smoking, please, not in front of the building, but in the back of the building. We created special space for smokers there. Please know that the event is being filmed. Not unimportant to know. And thank you to all contributors, and thank you all of you for coming, for braving the elements. And thank you, of course, as always, my team for working as hard and with so much joy as they do. Thank you very much, and Harry, the floor is yours.